The goblins say, trick or treat, it must be Halloween.
Let's pause for a moment to look at similarities between this one and the first one. Trilogy of Terror, Tales of Terror. 3 stories in each movie. Vincent Price in all stories, Karen Black in all stories. Man, it's not just trilogies of tales, it's actually trilogies of similarities. Who would have thought it? Okay, they're really only similar on the very surface. Trilogy of Terror is one of those movies that, at least to me, manages to completely save itself by the end. As I said, Karen Black plays a character in all 3 stories, and I personally found the first 2 utterly and completely forgettable. The first is about sexual perversion and revenge, and the other has a predictable dual personality battle. Perhaps it's just me, but I found both of these stories to be a complete snore. But this is a highly beloved movie for horror fans, and the sole reason for that is the last story, Amelia. Here, Karen Black plays what at first glance may well be the single most boring person on the planet, whose biggest worry is whether to spend her evening visiting her mother or her boyfriend. But things soon go crazy when a Suni fetish doll she bought as a present for said boyfriend comes to life and starts attacking her. What? You're expecting more to this story? There isn't any more, that's it. And it is fucking great! This is how you do it, folks. You take your premise, simple or silly as it may sound on the surface, and you run with it. That is what this segment understands. There's no knowing wink to the audience that, yeah, this is silly, bear with us. There's no overly complicated statement as to why the doll comes to life and attacks her in the first place. There's no underlying twist in that it was built by a jealous lover or something. No, a woman is attacked by a vicious little bastard, and it is horrifying. Because it is played absolutely and utterly straight. Plus, just look at this little shitbag. He's ugly, he's primitive, he's mean, he has a fucking spear, and he's out to get you, and nothing will deter him from that goal. Add to this that the movie ends on what is probably one of the creepiest images I've ever come across in these anthology films, one I will not spoil for you guys, and you have yourselves a winner at the very end of a string of otherwise boring stories. This story is like eating a very tasty dessert right after plowing your way through a burnt, disgusting main dish. I love it.
The goblins say, trick or treat, it must be Halloween.
And back to King we go. You know, I'll never understand why everybody seems to hate this sequel to King and Romero's great tribute to the classic EC horror comic from the 50s. I mean, sure, I like the first one better, but what's wrong with this one? Is it the fact that there are less stories? Well, I can see how that would be disappointing, but if the pacing is alright and the stories are good, then what's the problem? Is it because the wraparound is animated this time? Personally, I find that just adds to the comic book feel of the movie and makes me enjoy it all the more. Personally, I love all 3 stories here. So much so that it was really hard for me to pick. The slasher fan in me really wants to pick the first story, Chief Woodenhead, where a cigar store wooden Indian statue gives a group of punks what they deserve. And the gorehound in me loves the hopelessness of the situation in the raft. But I think, once again, my love goes out to the last segment of the movie, The Hitchhiker. Much like with Amelia, it all lies in simplicity and ferocity in this case. In this story, Lois Childs plays Annie Lansing, a woman trying to get to the airport to meet her husband in time, so she can keep the affair she's having with another man a secret after she stayed with him a little too long on that particular important night. On her way, she accidentally runs over a hitchhiker and opts for bailing on him rather than sticking around to help. She tries to reason that she can live with what just happened to get over this, but the problem is...
Back to the ride, lady!
Yeah. That thing. As you may have guessed, the hitchhiker is not happy to have been run over, and what appears to be his corpse keeps popping back up to terrorize the woman as she's on the road. So once again we're dealing with the very simple setup of attacker versus victim, with the relentlessness of the attacker being what really sells the scares. But wherein Amelia, the victim, is fairly innocent, here we're dealing with a woman punished for infidelity, sticking with the EC Comics themes of crime and punishment. Not to mention the attacker is, well, quite a bit larger and it is taking place at high speeds. That and the actual character of the zombie itself really just terrifies me with its constant cries of ah! Yes! That! God! The simple-mindedness and the feral way he seems to scream this single purpose just really adds a lot to this story for me. It's both tragic to think that this zombie was just a guy who wanted a ride and was run down by someone who didn't care for him, and somehow sickly mocking to the victim. If only she'd had a bit of kindness in her heart, none of this would have happened. And while this movie is not quite as good as the first one, it's still good to know that the series at least ended on a— oh god damn it!
The goblins say, trick or treat, it must be Halloween.
I'm sure all of you know of the TV series Tales from the Crypt. And why not? It was awesome! Most of you are probably also well aware that Tales from the Crypt got its name and many of its stories from the EC horror comics of old, such as Vault of Horror, Shock Suspense Stories, and indeed Tales from the Crypt. But did you also know that there was a 1972 movie that adapted some of these stories as well? Well, there was, and this one does not go for having the amusing little Crypt Keeper host we so love and adore today, instead settling for doing its damnedest to make the stories told here actually really goddamn frightening. And it sets the mood wonderfully with its wraparound story, seeing 5 people somehow ending up inside the same crypt, and a creepy character telling each of them tales of their own deaths. I'll be honest with you, I actually don't remember most of the stories here very clearly, and I am really due for a rewatch on this movie. But there's one story in this film that still pops up in my mind from time to time, and that I remember quite vividly, and I like to think that's a pretty damn good sign that it's the best of the bunch. And since we're so close to the season anyway, I might as well give some props to the first story and all through the house. In this story, Joan Collins plays Joanne Clayton, who rather viciously murders her husband on Christmas Eve, intent on collecting his insurance money. It's just too bad she had to do this on the very same night that a demented killer in a Santa Claus costume is stalking the streets. So that makes this, what, the 4th story that has a woman attacked by someone or something, and the 2nd where she kind of deserves it? Man, chicks get all the fun horror action. It's not fair. Well, like I said, the EC stories often had a thing for focusing quite a bit on crime and punishment, and boy is there punishment here. This is yet another simple and vicious story, doing a very fine job at racking up the suspense throughout as the woman becomes trapped in the very house she just committed murder to keep for herself. It really is a great proto-slasher, and need I remind you, came out 12 years before people threw a complete shit fit over the concept of a killer Santa Claus in Silent Night, Deadly Night. Guess people just had balls in the 70s. Or, brains. Another thing that makes it stand out is that this is the only story from the EC comics that both get adapted into movies, since this film was followed by Vault of Horror, and the TV series. And it's really interesting to see how differently they tackle it, with the 70s film version making a much bigger deal out of making it a terrifying cat and mouse game, while the TV version focuses on brutality and grossness. Yet both racking up the scares and working in their own right. Just goes to show how many different ways you can treat the same idea. Some good short holiday terror here. Check it out.
The goblins say, trick or treat, it must be Halloween.
I've already gushed about the VHS series and why I think its existence is so goddamn refreshing and enjoyable, with only 2 of the so far 9 stories not being huge hits for me. And when I first put on this movie, boy was I excited! And nervous, because, could they really do it? Could they combine found footage and anthology? Could they really breathe some life into this and push the limits of what was possible in found footage? Well, let's just say it couldn't have started out any more horrifying and reassuring, as the first story of the first film, Amateur Night, completely and utterly blew my balls off. In this story, 3 guys decided it would be hilarious to record themselves as they go to a club and pick up some chicks to bring home and, well, have some drunken and really quite uncomfortable looking sex with them. One of the girls, however, soon proves to be much, much more than the boys are prepared to handle. Surprise time! You know, for all the praise I just gave this story, I actually hated it when I first put it on. And there's a really simple reason for that. It's noisy. The first couple of minutes are just ear-burstingly awful to listen to. And I know why. I appreciate some realism in the sound quality. I mean, this is an old spy camera. We're seeing it on a VHS tape and it takes place in a nightclub. I mean, the sound is gonna be bad, but it was just too much. I had to turn the volume all the way down to even get through it. But it all pays off when they get back to the apartment. Not only does the movie immediately make it clear that it's not about to make any compromises, as it shows us pretty full-on nudity, it also treats the whole situation just as ugly as it really is. There's no victory here, there's no conquest. It's drunken assholes pathetically recording what looks like the most awful drunken sex imaginable. And when this strange girl starts really showing off what she is, things get intense so fast that it's hard not to feel for them after all. Especially our main character, who was easily the nicest one of the three. And it sets it up so well. You know through the whole thing that something is wrong with this girl, but you keep wondering what it could be. And when it's revealed, it is seen, not told. You just watch the horror unfold. There are no conveniently placed books or clues or a brainiac that knows everything about what's going on. No, it really feels like we're just in the shoes of a person who happened to see something terrifying and happened to document it. And that makes it all the more real and horrifying. I don't think this series could have started off any stronger, and it made me gleefully excited for the rest of what the film had to offer. Great job, guys!